down through the years of Christian teaching and theology has been the language of satisfaction. In other words, the cross, the blood of Jesus, satisfies God's wrath. Now, the words satisfy or satisfaction do not appear in the Bible in relation to the cross. The church leaders in every century of the church's tradition down through the years have always maintained that some sort of satisfaction was necessary before God, a holy God, could forgive sin. But they've not always agreed on what needed to be satisfied, who needed to be satisfied, or why. Some people taught, right from the very early times, certainly in the early times in the Greek church, that Satan needed to be satisfied. In the 2nd century, some leaders insisted that the death of Christ on the cross was the price which Satan demanded for the release of his captives, as if Satan was a kind of terrorist taking people hostage, and this was the price to pay, this was the ransom. And that the Christ endured the cross in order to satisfy the devil's rights. Remember that, that's a very important part of that theory. Now, just as some believers ignore Satan and say he has no power at all, so this idea, it seems to me, overemphasizes the power and authority of the devil. It's very clear that the devil did hold Satan, the devil did hold human beings captive from Eden up until the cross, and that he was Lord of sin and death, and that Jesus did come to liberate us from him. But Satan has always only been a rebel and a usurper. He may have gained some rights over humanity through sin, but he has never acquired any rights over God. And God has never had to do anything to satisfy the devil. Now, later on in this teaching series, we're going to look at the full extent of the defeat of Satan at Calvary. We must remember that Jesus triumphed decisively, and he has delivered us from Satan's bondage, but we must not think that Satan has any right which God was obligated to satisfy. And then a little later on in church history, around the 4th century, Ambrose, one of the Latin church fathers, taught that the law was that which needed to be satisfied. He explained the cross by insisting that the law was the primary focus of satisfaction, that the law itself had to be satisfied. And he and others like him argued that sin disregards and disobeys God's law, and that sinners therefore incur an automatic penalty by breaking the law. And they insist that the law must be upheld and penalties must be paid. Sinners could not simply be let off. The cross, therefore, was necessary to satisfy the requirements of the law. And these people use Daniel chapter 6, for example, in the support of their argument. Although King Darius respected Daniel and wanted to save him, the Persian law could not be revoked. It had to take its course. The penalty had to be paid in some way. So they argued that God in the same way loves sinners and longs to save them, but he cannot violate the law which has condemned these sinners. And therefore the cross was there to give satisfaction to that law. But the truth is, God is not caught up like Darius was in some technical muddle. He's not in some kind of legal wrangle in which he's almost tricked into the cross. And the law is not some kind of external, inflexible, legal code with automatic penalties that are set in motion independent of God. There is some truth in this emphasis on the law. Of course, Christ came born under the law, and he has come to release us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. But that's not the same thing as teaching that the law itself needed to be satisfied. Just as our deliverance from Satan does not mean that he has rights over which God has rights which God had to satisfy, so our release from the law does not mean that the law had demands which God had to satisfy. Redemption and victory are consequences of the cross. They're not its essential causes. It's a very significant, important statement. Let me say it again. Redemption and victory are consequences of the cross, not its essential causes.